Welcome, everyone. Today, I am joined by Dr. Marianne Matzo for another amazing live stream. We are chatting today all about the changing roles of relationships when one partner becomes a caregiver for another. So really important topic, and we are super excited about it. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. And welcome, everyone. I see a few people starting to trickle in. We'll wait here for just a minute or two till we see a few more people. If you're in the comments, feel free to say hello and would love to hear from you as we just wait until some more people join. Welcome. I see a few people on our live. As I mentioned, if you're joining us just now, we are having a live stream today about the changing roles of relationships when one partner becomes a caregiver for another. If you're joining us now, feel free to drop a hello in the chat. Would love to hear from you, and we'll get started here in just a minute. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Taylor Schumann, and I am the editor and the tech expert at seniorliving.org. Today, as I mentioned, I am joined by Dr. Marianne Matzo for a live Q&A. And today is all about the changing roles of relationships between senior partners when one partner becomes a caregiver for another, which is a super common thing. And so I'm really excited to get into that. And if you're joining us and you just have any general questions about aging, about senior care, senior living, we are here to answer them. So before we get started, I would love to give you a little bit of background. If you've been on our live streams before, you would definitely recognize Dr. Marianne. She is the best. But if you're new to us, just to give you guys a little bit of info on her, she is a distinguished expert in palliative care and a certified gerontological nurse practitioner with a career dedicated to caring for older adults, improving end-of-life care, and education. She is a retired tenured professor of nursing with extensive experience as a hospice and palliative care nurse researcher and educator. She's also authored numerous publications, including the U.S.'s first palliative care nursing textbook. She's a funded researcher and a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing. And since retiring, she's gone on an incredible new venture, founding a nonprofit called Everyone Dies, which is dedicated to educating the public on serious illness, dying, and bereavement through weekly podcasts and a children's book. So welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Dr. Marianne's work with Everyone Dies, I would highly recommend it. The podcast is awesome. There's lots of great resources on her website as well. So you can scan that QR code if you want to learn a little bit more. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into our Q&A. So if you're just joining us, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I see a few people saying hello. It's great to see you all. And if you have questions throughout, just drop them in the chat. You'll just need to be signed into a YouTube account in order to do so. And before we have any questions submitted, I'll just go ahead and jump in with a few that we got beforehand. So again, we're talking all about the relationship between senior partners when one person becomes a caregiver for another. So Dr. Marianne, I would love to know, when one partner becomes a caregiver, how does that shift the emotional dynamic of a long-term relationship?
Well, part of it depends on what's the reason for becoming a caregiver and if it's a short-term thing or if it's a long-term thing. So if one partner's had, let's say, a heart attack or a stroke, you say, well, there's going to be some rehab here, there's going to be some adjustments, some changes, but eventually, at some point, 6 months, even to a year, depending on what's gone wrong or, what the issue is, things are going to kind of settle out, even out, and you find your new rhythm within your new relationship. So that's one thing. It's another thing if you're being a caregiver for, let's say, a dementing illness like Alzheimer's disease. That's something that doesn't have an end to it. And, well, it does have an end, but it's not an end to the caregiving part of it. And there's no cure for it. So if you have somebody with a dementing illness, one partner, then they're going to continue to lose function, and the caregiver's role is going to continue to increase. And there's never going to come to that kind of stabilization place. It's just going to be continued adjustment as the partner loses ability as a result of that illness. Or if it's cancer, cancer is now a long-term care disease. It's not as it was even 20 years ago, where many, or most people died. So it's one of those things where, okay, we'll deal with this, we'll deal with the surgery, we'll deal with the chemo, and then we'll see what happens. And then, you might go for 5 years, and maybe there's a recurrence, or maybe there's a different problem, or because chemo, the cancer can cause a variety of different things. So that's one of those where it'll continue until one partner dies. But it's, do you ever get actually back to baseline? It depends on the cancer. It depends on the treatment. So what you're looking at, what the situation is, depends on what that disease is. But, I don't know, we could take Alzheimer's, for example, because that's probably, I think it is, that's a disease that person who has it isn't ever going to go back to what they were. And so the caregiving is for the rest of your relationship. And so when you're in that committed relationship, there are roles that the two of you have. Somebody does the garbage, somebody does the floors, somebody does the cooking, somebody does the shopping. You kind of had it worked out. And then with somebody being diagnosed with a dementing illness, are they going to be able to contribute the way that they did? No. They might be able to continue some things for a while, but everything eventually is going to fall to that caregiver. So the cooking, providing all the care, making all the decisions, everything that's done within that household falls on that caregiver. And that is a truly exhausting role. It's very, very difficult. Then there's the loss of that spouse or that partner, whatever that relationship is, as they get sicker and sicker and sicker. So there's the grief on top of it. And there's the change in the role. If you were always the one that you could say, just handle the finances and let me know the bottom line, you don't have that luxury anymore. It all is going to come back to you to say, well, do we have enough money? I have to make out the checks. I have to call the person who is going to do any repairs on this house. Everything is falling to you. And the relationship can't help but change because neither one of you are the same person anymore. One person is sick and the other person is doing everything to try to keep everything afloat. On top of that, I've seen many spouses who don't want people to know that their partner has a dementing illness. So they do, it's sort of like this very fast tap dance all the time when they're around other people because they don't want their partner to look like they can't do things. And so it's an exhausting role. You don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know what's the next thing that's going to occur. And it's a really hard change. On top of that, are you with people who can appreciate what's going on? I've seen so many people who are taking care of somebody in their family, and they go, let's say, to church, and everybody says, I don't know what you're talking about. He doesn't seem like he has Alzheimer's. And because, either for that moment, those brief interactions, they can still be themselves. And I've had so many people who say it makes me crazy because they can't see what I'm having to do. They don't see him, or her day after day after day. And they all act like it's all in my head. And so you don't even have the support from the outside. Like if you had boils on your face or something, people could see it. Oh, yeah, there's something really, really wrong there. But something like, Alzheimer's, you don't see it when you're walking down the street, at least in the early stages.
Yeah, that's so difficult. I guess the question that comes to mind related to dementia specifically is, for those of us who aren't caring for a loved one and maybe don't see those ins and outs of the day-to-day, how can we be helping? And maybe for caregivers, how can caregivers ask for help in a way that, they're going to get the most helpful response? Because you can just say like, oh, let me know if you need anything, but, that doesn't really do anything.
Well, so there's gender roles here. So typically, and I'm going to say typically, generally, don't get mad at me and say, oh, well, I take care of my husband and I don't act like that. But generally, for women, it's very hard for us to ask for help, to say, I need you to bring me dinner every Tuesday because I just need a break. We don't do that. We take care of everything. And think we should and feel bad if we don't. And so in that case, if you want to help somebody, you ring the doorbell and ring the casserole, because they're not going to ask you for it. They're not going to say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't even have the thought, I can't even go out to the grocery store because I don't know what he's going to do while I'm gone. So just deliver it. We have a podcast that's called Grief Groceries. And you don't have to be grieving to get groceries. But if you've got somebody who's just home and you know that they're taking care of somebody, when you go do your grocery shopping, my go-to is Oreos. So, if I'm sick or someone's taking care of me, drop us some Oreos because that would be really good. But whatever it is that somebody would find nurturing, might be a really nice salad. It might be takeout food, but just deliver it. You don't have to hang around. Sometimes it's more confusing with all the rhythms that you have to get into for caregiving to have other people around. Just drop it, call them and say, hey, go to your front door. There's something there for you. And that way you can be supportive. Nobody has to ask for anything. And, if you buy something somebody doesn't like, it's okay. They'll eat. And sometimes they will just eat and say, oh, that was better than I thought it was. Men, on the other hand, have a sort of a different view. I had one man who said that it's like an amputation. That when his wife was ill, it felt like he had lost the significant part of him. And like his wife had been amputated from his side. And men, as depending on the dynamics within the relationship, you might think, oh, they're not going to be able to take care of me. They're not going to be able to manage everything. But if there's nobody else to do it, they'll say, oh, I can do this. I can take care of everything. And they're much better at asking for help, of saying, hey, could you come sit with her so I can go get my hair cut or whatever. So men in general are better at asking for help and letting people in. And who knows, as Gen Z and all these, the younger generations, hopefully they'll be better at it than the older generation in terms of asking people to step in and to help. But people aren't going to ask in general, so just do it. They need it. Just do it.
I love that. And like you said, even if it's maybe a meal that they don't love, or it's not the perfect thing. It's so often just the fact that someone thought of you and wanted to care for you and help you in a way. And I feel like that just goes a mile towards mental health and mood as well, even if it's not, the perfect dinner that they would have wanted, So. Okay, we got another question, but this one's kind of similar, but I just want to touch on maybe family dynamics. MD asks, how can I best support a family member who's taking care of their spouse long term? So is there any, additional things that you want to add related to family here?
Well, I would say that from what you see, it's probably 10 times worse. It's because people try to hold it together when there's, company in the house, even if it's family members. You want people to come over, and if it's really horrible, people are screaming at each other and everything, nobody's going to want to come. And so you want to portray that, if you're the mother and father and have the adult kids and the grandkids over, and you think, this is what we do, this is what we always did. But it may not be what you can do in terms of all the chaos of the kids and all the people and the disruption of the routine that people will get used to. And so, kind of be sensitive to the fact that it's not going to be as it always was. And that's part of the grief too, is that those relationships that you had, those times where you go and sit and talk with your father about what's going on in your life or whatever, play chess or whatever it was that you would do. If he has dementing illness, he's not going to be able to participate in that same way. And you're going to say to yourself, well, I miss that. I want that. Yeah, you do. And it's just, some people will say Alzheimer's is the gift that keeps on giving, meaning it's not really a gift, and in that it takes away and takes away. And so you get used to the things that you've lost, and then there's another loss coming up for you. And that's what's difficult. And sometimes people will even ghost you. They'll say, or they might not even say anything at all. They might just disappear. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, how come we don't see so-and-so anymore? God, it's been so long since, George came over. It's because illnesses, especially terminal illnesses and illnesses where it's constantly things are being taken away, are hard to watch and hard to bear witness to. And some people will pull away and not watch it. Where others who sometimes you wouldn't even think, these are the people who are going to be by my side, they're the ones who show up. So I would talk with my patients think about what are the things that you need, and kind of draw it on a piece of paper, put yourself in the center, and then put, circles all the way around each of that, and say, what are the things I need? I need somebody to drive me to appointments. I need somebody to, take me grocery shopping. I need somebody to watch my partner so that I can go get my hair cut. And take a look at that, and then take a look at the people in your life and look at what are the skills that people have. And we don't usually look at people in our lives in that way. But you say, he's not much of a talker, but he would be really good to drive me around. So don't put that person in a position where they have to talk. If that's not what they're good at, ask people to do the things that they're good at. Or maybe there's somebody who's a really good baker or cook, but they don't have a car and they don't drive. So you could ask the person who's a good driver and has a car to go and pick up the food that this person makes. And then everybody is doing within the scope of what they're good at. You have somebody who's a really good talker, and you need somebody to talk through what's going on and the loss that you're feeling and the confusion that you're feeling. well, then that's the person you talk to, not the person who's good at driving the car. And so I really suggest that people take a look at that and ask the people who have the skills to do the things that you need them to do. They'll be relieved that it's within sort of their wheelhouse. You'll get a lot of yeses because people do want to help, but they might not want to help. You give somebody a shower, but there might be this other person who's like, oh, yeah, that's easy. I'll do that. I'll come over and help you do that. And so find the people, think of what their strengths are, and then sort of slot them into the things that you need to get through your everyday.
I love that. I think that's a great idea. So we've talked a little bit about, communicating between, say, loved ones that are watching someone else care for a spouse. But I'd love to talk about the kind of communication between the partners. So I know you've spent a lot of your career studying communication around serious illness. So how can couples maintain open, honest conversation during these transitions without adding to the emotional burden? And, this could be, obviously, it's going to look different if the person has dementia, if they have cancer, or whatever it might be. But yeah, just maybe general communication tips.
Well, it's kind of, that's a hard thing to do, to be able to think about, okay, we're going to have this honest and open communication. Of course, did you ever have it in the previous 30 years of your marriage? So you have to look at how have you been communicating before this happened. You're not going to suddenly be in this situation where you're the caregiver and the magic communication gods are going to come down and say, here, you finally can communicate effectively. Because I would see people come into my clinic that have sort of abysmal communication. And now they're in this additional stressor of being a caregiver, and they can't, you can't magically start to do what you never did. But if you're thinking about, and especially, not adding an additional emotional burden, I think really, really honest, open, effective communication is really hard work. So maybe what we need to do is think about how can we simplify this? Does it have to be completely honest and completely open and, or can it be, I love you. Now, would you put your shoes on? And be very simple. So again, if we're back with a dementing illness, you have to be very directive. You have to keep things, not a whole lot of words, because if you get to like the 8th word, you've lost them. The connection's not there. So keeping it simple. I had one person tell me that the way that they did it is that they took their relationship, their marriage, and they metaphorically put it in a box and put it on the top shelf of the closet, because everything had changed so much because of the dementia that in terms of being husband and wife, it's really kind of not who you are anymore, even though you are. But your relationship isn't that way. You've got one person who is managing the whole thing. Now, maybe he or she managed the whole thing for the last 30 years. Well, then this won't be that much different. But if they hadn't always been doing that, then this is going to be extremely different. And then look at your expectations for this relationship. If I'm expecting my spouse to mow the lawn every week and he can't even put his shoes on, then I'm going to be frustrated and he's going to be frustrated. So you have to adjust your expectations, adjust what you require to be happy. And I was reading this book. It's called We Are Not Ourselves. And it's by Matthew Thomas, Thomas. And about a man who has very early stage dementia. Nobody even knows that's what's going on until probably 3/4 of the way through. But there's a section here that I thought was really appropriate to what we were talking about. So I'll just read it to you. What it says is, there had been times she wanted to kill Ed. Now that he was declining so quickly, she just wanted him home for Christmas. It shocked her that her goals had dwindled to one, but that was all she could focus on even now, 8 months away from the holiday. Once Ed left, she knew he was never coming back. There used to be so many goals. They'd made a list at one point. Learn some Gaelic together. Visit the wineries in Napa Valley. She couldn't remember what else was on the list. They hadn't accomplished any of them. They hadn't finished the house. Much of the first floor looked new and appealing, but a good deal of the second floor was dilapidated and run down. She hadn't gone back for a doctorate. She hadn't learned to play better tennis. They'd never taken that trip to Europe. They might never take another trip anywhere. They didn't need to go anywhere anymore, though. If she could get him to Christmas, she would take it without complaint, whatever was coming. A proper send-off was all she asked, surrounded by the regular crowd on Christmas Eve. The kitchen, the beating heart of the house, full to bursting. By midnight, no one would be left. Smiling Ed in his suit on the couch would be incident-free. Then Mass in the morning, then a short drive to someone else's house, some coffee cake, and a modest second round of gifts. Then let it come down. She didn't need the whole day. Let him have a fit at 4 o'clock. Let him be raving and dangerous and inconsolable. She'd drive him to the home herself. She always hated Christmas night anyway. It was the loneliest night of the year. So see how she goes through all these places, all these things that she wants, to Christmas Eve and half a Christmas Day. That's all, she'll take that. And if, and she says it's 8 months till Christmas, and maybe a week before Christmas, she'll say, I'll just take Christmas Eve. Because as a caregiver, you're constantly required to make adjustments and make changes. And if you're in a coupled relationship, that relationship is really gone.
Wow, that is so profound to hear it from someone's perspective in that way. And it just demonstrates how much those relationships and the roles change and the things that you want change. And thank you for sharing that. Could you remind us what the book is called again? Also, if anyone wants to read it.
Does it read backwards when I do that?
Yes.
It's called We Are Not Ourselves. And it's by Matthew Thomas.
That's great. Thank you.
You can see it was a long one, and you can see I kept dropping it in the pool as I was reading it.
Happens. It's a well-loved book. All right. It looks like we have a few more questions from the chat. Maya asks, what can middle-age or early retirement age couples do to prepare for what the future of aging holds?
Well, things that you can do is do your will, do your advanced care planning. If you have a house, even just if only what you have is a house, but a house and any money or whatever you have, you should put it in a trust. You go to a lawyer, and I don't know how much it is, maybe $500 or so, depending on where you live. And you just say, I want to do my advanced care planning. I want to put our money in a trust. Everything is in a trust. And you and your spouse are the trustees. And if one of you dies, it's automatic because of the way the trust is that you can manage things. And so that can all get done while you're middle-aged. And it should, if you're planning on a dementing illness or not, even, just do that. And then you've got your do your durable power of attorney. Just get all that paperwork done, because you just never know. You just never know. And, like the flood waters in Texas are just another example of you just never know. And so we should all do that. We have a couple of podcasts about how to plan, what papers you need, how to put have it all together in a box, in a fireproof, waterproof box. That we bought ours on Amazon, and it's all in there. And our passwords. You don't stop to think about, well, if something happens to one of us, could I get into his phone and be able to do whatever I needed to do, or to get his passwords, or could he get mine? And so you take a look at what are these things that are important. And as much as we've always been told, don't write down your passwords, don't put them anywhere. For long-term planning, what we're told is get a password book. I have a password book, and I have all my passwords in it. I'm not going to show it to you because they are my passwords, but they be backwards. Anyway. And that way, and you put it in that box with all that other stuff, and when you adjust things and all of that, you plan so that if someone else had to do it, they could. Not that you're planning that someone else is going to have to, but if. And then that way, if God forbid whatever happens, one person's not left saying, oh, good God, why didn't we do this when we had the time to do it? And it's part of that's fear. Part of that is that we don't want to think of ourselves as not being able to remember our passwords, but I already think of myself as someone who doesn't remember passwords, so I have the book. But those are the things that you can do to prepare yourself and to make it easier on whoever's going to be helping out and doing those things.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. I love the idea of a password book. My grandma has one, and somebody was teasing her about it. Like, why don't you just use them online like the rest of us? And my uncle works in identity theft protection, and he was like, she's doing it better than all of you guys, because an online hacker can't access this notebook that's locked away, but they can access your online password. So I love that. I need to start a password book because that's a great idea.
Yeah. They always told us don't ever write it down, but geez, how many passwords do we have?
Gosh, so many. All right, we've got another question here. MD says, how do you decide when it's the best time for a spouse to seek alternative care? So maybe home care or assisted living, a nursing home, etc.
Well, it's really not the spouse who's going to be seeking that. It's going to be you saying, this situation cannot continue the way it is without me dying. And if you look at all of the research, the caregiver, the person who's doing the caregiving, has the worse health than the person they're taking care of. And they tend to die before the person they're taking care of. Because what happens? The caregiver isn't sleeping well. They keep one ear open in case the partner gets up and is wandering, goes out of the house, or whatever kind of thing occurs. So they have a baby monitor, something so that they're always one ear listening. Are they up in there? Are they moving around? So they're not sleeping well. They take their partner to all the appointments that they need to go to, but people put off their own self-care. So if it's a woman, they put off their mammogram. They put off going to even their primary care for things that they need. They don't get their blood pressure pills refilled. They're not doing what they would generally be doing. They don't even go to get their hair cut. They have, whatever god-awful color that they can find at CVS, they're putting in their hair. Nobody's cutting it. They don't feel that they look their best. They don't feel their best. It's quantifiable. We can see the data that says that this is true, not about the hair, but about the other stuff. And so then you see people who will be saying, because I read I don't know all of them, but on social media, I look at the questions that people ask, and that's how we decide what we're going to present on our podcast. But this torture that we put ourselves through when we say, I really can't do this anymore, and I need to look at long-term care for this spouse. But instead of doing that and looking for long-term care and thinking about, okay, so how am I going to do this? They tie themselves up in knots saying, I said I would do this for better or for worse. I made a commitment to this partner. I can't possibly put them in this old folks home. And I for many years did a support group for Alzheimer's support group for care partners taking care of somebody at home. And I would listen to this about, they were just killing themselves with the idea that they were going to have to put somebody in the home. And I think we think about long-term care as, the home, and it's horrible and it's going to be the worst thing. But every single time that somebody in the group had, put somebody into the nursing home, had them admitted to a nursing home, they'd come back and they'd say, they're so happy there. So what happens? They're in a place where there's other people who are up 24/7. So whatever their biorhythm is doing, if they're up, there's somebody else up. They're getting all of their needs met. They're getting their showers, their baths. They're, in a sort of a safe way. They're not worried about somebody's going to break in. Nobody's worried about them wandering away because they're in a safe environment with bells on the doors, or depending on, everybody does it a little differently, but they're safe. And the person with the dementing disease feels on a visceral level that they're safe, and that they're not with somebody who's harried and frantic. And so they relax in, and the caregiver says, why did I resist this for so long? They're happy there. Yeah, they are. And so, we can talk to ourselves in any way that we want. And I always advocate, let's talk nice to ourselves, because we might be the only ones who ever do. And say, what is really best for them? Yes, it's wonderful that they can be in their own home. But if they're wandering and agitated and frustrated because you took the knobs off the stove and they can't make a cup of tea, and they're agitated about taking a bath or a shower in your bathroom because they have to lift their leg over there, and all of the accommodations that we can't possibly make to a home, they're all there already with people who are there for 8 hours a day, and then they go home. So they're not exhausted, or at least not totally exhausted like you are. So it's a good environment for people. And there's a security about it that people appreciate. And then you can come in, you can spend the day with them. You can go have lunch with your friends. You can actually go to the doctor and get your heart medicine refilled. And you can have some healing for yourself too. But it only happens if you sort of give yourself permission to say, this is what's best for us. It's not just best for you, it's best for your partner also.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that must be such a hard shift in thinking. And kind of on that similar line, how do you suggest caregivers manage maybe feelings of guilt, resentment, or isolation that arise during their time in the caregiving role?
Well, I think that there's probably going to be resentment within there. What I've heard from people is they say, this is not what I planned for my old age. I've heard so many stories where, and I don't know what it is about the camper, but so many stories about, we just bought a camper and we were going to go see the United States, spend some time with this kid and travel all over. And either a cancer diagnosis comes or an Alzheimer's diagnosis comes, and that camper never gets used. And I've like too many camper stories. I don't know if it's buying a camper that just jinxes you or what. But I can't tell you how many. There's
That's
just
so
a
funny.
lot. So yeah, there's resentment. I've been waiting all this time for the kids to get grown up and gone so you and I could, take naps in the afternoon or do whatever it is that we want to do and go out for dinner. We finally have a little bit of money. We can go out. No, I can't do any of that because your partner gets too agitated with there's too much commotion. Fill in the blanks for all the, if somebody has cancer, they don't want to eat anyway. They don't feel that well anyway. They may not have the strength to go out. So all the plans that you made, all the fantasies that you had about what your golden years were going to be like didn't turn out. And yeah, people feel resentment. And I can see it. And I can say, yeah, you should feel resentful. It's the loss of the fantasy that you planned for yourself, but it's still a loss. And so in view of that loss, what are you going to do instead? What other choices can you make? What else would make you happy? How do you fill that void that's been created by the loss of your dreams, by the loss of your loved one, by your grief? And when you're in the thick of caregiving, you might be so exhausted that you say to yourself, I don't have the energy to even think about that. But I don't know, if somebody can come over and you can take a bath and just relax, if you can let yourself just take that bath and relax, or let other people nurture you by bringing you food, or if your partner that you're taking care of can go for a walk, or even if they're in a wheelchair, can you push them and go out for a walk? Or maybe you want to get a dog, maybe not a puppy because you don't need that much work, but maybe get a dog from a pound that's, already toilet trained that you can take care of and have that nurturing from a dog or from a cat. But, let yourself rest without guilt. Let yourself relax. And in that relaxation, depending on your generation, rest is not laziness. It's part of how we survive. And to say, if I'm going to survive another day to do this 24-hour-a-day job or 26-hour-a-day job, then I have to have something that's going to let me keep going. I have to go to the doctor and get my blood pressure meds filled. I have to have more than just M&Ms and toast to eat during the day. I have to take care of myself. even if I think I don't have the time or the energy. And if you get to that point where you say, all I'm eating is toast and I haven't showered in a week, then you need to stop and say, this is not sustainable. I'm going to kill myself in this process if I don't start doing something different. And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a challenge, but I think that's kind of the perfect message, is to let yourself rest without guilt and to take care of yourself, even if you feel like you don't have the time for it. I think those are two essential things. One of our viewers, James, said, "We don't have any illness, but my wife stays at home. I always try to make sure that she has her away time from, or her time away from the baby, to journal, to eat, etc." Yeah, it doesn't really matter where you're at in life, but being able to carve out that time for yourself is so essential.
I think what's different, though, James, is that when you have a baby, you know that they're going to eventually grow up and walk and go to school and hopefully eventually move out of your house. And so you have the sense of, this is what I'm doing right now. This is the commitment I made to this child. You know, you kind of know generally what's going to go on in terms of, they'll go to first grade, then they'll go to second grade. And, you know, it's real different when it's your partner, you know, when you don't know how long it's going to last. And maybe your partner was always very nurturing of you, you know, like you are of your wife. And now there's nobody that's making sure that I have time to journal. And I don't know, is this going to last for 10 years? Is this going to last for 20 years? And will I be alive to even see it at the end? So I can see your point, James, that, you know, at any age, at any point in our life, that these are the struggles or the challenges that we see. But in elder care, it's very different, because your partner, you know, you want them to be your lover, you want them to be your friend, you want to be able to talk about what jerks your kids are being, whatever that is. You want to be able to have that. But in certain situations with certain diseases, you can't, you don't have it. And I think that's one of the things that's really hard, is like, when will this end? With a kid, unless they do real stupid stuff, but got to even plan on that, because kids do stupid stuff all the time. That there's sort of a natural trajectory that isn't the same in this kind of elder care.
Definitely, that makes sense. Well, as we've talked about, there are so many challenges that come with caring for a loved one, but we just want to remind you as we wrap things up that you're not alone in it. If you are a caregiver and you're caring for a loved one, we would invite you to join our Caregivers Corner. It's a Facebook group where you can connect, you can share your experiences, and you can seek advice from experts. And, you know, when you're having those difficult days, when you need advice, when you need help, you can lean on those individuals. So I would highly recommend joining that. You can scan that QR code to join. Or if you are new to caregiving and it feels overwhelming, you can also take our Compassionate Caregiving course, which is a completely free course at seniorliving.org/caregiving/courses, or you can scan the QR code here on the screen. It'll give you all of the essential skills to help you get started and link out to other useful resources and things to help you. So just remember, you're not alone, and take care of yourself. And with that, we are going to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Dr. Marianne. This was such a wonderful conversation. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.